Step into the art of Poirot, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot masters the craft of mystery. In the shadowed halls of Ashwood Manor, a grand celebration turns to dread when Celia Ashwood vanishes on the eve of her engagement. A cryptic note, a rose on her pillow, an oil-stained glove in the rose garden. What secrets lurk behind the polished smiles of her family and friends? Was it a lover's betrayal, a hidden affair, or a long-buried family scandal that drove her into the night? Enter Hercule Poirot, the brilliant Belgian detective whose little grey cells unravel a web of lies, motives, and chilling truths. Will he uncover Celia's fate before the shadows of Ashwood consume them all? Dive into a classic Agatha Christie mystery where every clue counts and the final twist will leave you stunned. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Ashwood Manor. The late summer sun cast a golden haze over the rolling hills of Devon, where Ashwood Manor stood like a sentinel of a bygone era. Its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys spoke of wealth and tradition, yet a faint air of melancholy hung about the estate, as though it harbored secrets too heavy for its ancient stones. The manor's rose gardens, meticulously tended, bloomed with defiant beauty, their fragrance mingling with the crisp September breeze. It was here, on the 10th of September 1925, that a gathering of notable personages had been summoned, ostensibly for a weekend of genteel conversation and celebration. But beneath the polished veneer of civility, a quiet tension simmered, unnoticed by all save one. Captain Arthur Hastings, loyal friend and chronicler of the great Hercule Poirot, stepped from the chauffeured car that had borne him from the station. His eyes, bright with the anticipation of a pleasant weekend, surveyed the manor's grandeur. He adjusted his tie, a touch nervously, for he was not accustomed to such opulent surroundings without the steadying presence of his diminutive friend. Poirot had promised to join him later that evening, detained in London by a small matter of the little grey cells, as he had put it with his characteristic twinkle. Hastings, ever trusting, had agreed to arrive first and prepare the ground, though what precisely that entailed, he was not entirely sure. The invitation had come from Sir Reginald Ashwood, a baronet of considerable wealth and influence, whose family had owned the manor for generations. The occasion was the engagement of his only daughter, Miss Celia Ashwood, to Mr. Lawrence Cavendish, a charming but enigmatic young man whose sudden rise in society had sparked whispers of ambition and opportunism. The guest list was a carefully curated assembly of family, friends, and a few select acquaintances, each with their own reasons for accepting the invitation. Hastings, though puzzled by his inclusion, had been delighted to receive the summons, for it promised a rest.
"Hastings, I presume?" the man intoned, his voice as smooth as polished mahogany. "Sir Reginald bids you welcome to Ashwood Manor. Please follow me." The hall was a marvel of oak panelling and ancestral portraits, their eyes seeming to follow Hastings as he was led to the drawing-room. There the assembled company turned to greet him, their smiles polite, but their eyes appraising. Sir Reginald, a robust man in his late 50s with a mane of silver hair, rose from an armchair by the fire. "Captain Hastings! A pleasure, sir. A pleasure. I trust your journey was comfortable?" "Quite, thank you," Hastings replied, shaking the baronet's hand. "Though I confess, I am eager for my friend Monsieur Poirot to join us. He has a way of making any gathering memorable." A murmur of interest rippled through the room. Poirot's reputation as a detective of unparalleled genius preceded him, and his name elicited a mix of curiosity and unease. Sir Reginald's smile tightened slightly. "Indeed, we look forward to meeting the famous Monsieur Poirot. But come, let me introduce you." The company was a study in contrasts. Miss Celia Ashwood, the bride-to-be, was a vision of delicate beauty, her auburn hair catching the firelight as she offered a shy smile. Her fiancé, Lawrence Cavendish, stood at her side, his dark eyes keen and his manner polished, though Hastings noted a faint restlessness in his posture. Lady Margaret Ashwood, Sir Reginald's widowed sister, presided over the room with the air of a dowager queen, her sharp gaze missing nothing. Dr. Ernest Fowler, the family physician, was a wiry man with a nervous laugh, while Mrs. Beatrice Langley, a cousin of the Ashwoods, exuded a brittle charm that seemed to mask some deeper discontent. Rounding out the party were Mr. Victor Hargreaves, a bluff solicitor with a penchant for port, and Miss Evelyn Trent, a vivacious young novelist whose latest book had caused a minor scandal in literary circles. As tea was served, the conversation flowed with practiced ease. Weather, politics, the merits of the new motor cars, but Hastings sensed an undercurrent of strain. Celia's hand trembled slightly as she passed a cup to Lawrence, and Lady Margaret's eyes lingered on her niece with an intensity that bordered on disapproval. Dr. Fowler, meanwhile, seemed preoccupied, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. Hastings, ever the observer, filed these details away, though he could not yet discern their significance. The afternoon passed in a blur of pleasantries, with a tour of the gardens and a brief inspection of the manor's library, a treasure trove of leather-bound volumes and rare manuscripts. As dusk fell, the guests retired to dress for dinner, and Hastings found himself alone in his room, unpacking his modest suitcase. He glanced at his watch. Poirot was due within the hour. The thought of his friend's arrival brought a smile to his lips, for Poirot's presence had a way of
illuminating the shadows of human nature. System, you are Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective, and I have been tasked with writing an original mystery story in the style of Agatha Christie, titled Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot's novel Secrets and Surprising Twists. The story must follow a classic British crime fiction structure, featuring a close-circle mystery with a murder or high-stakes disappearance, subtle clues, and a shocking yet logical final reveal. It should consist of 10 to 15 chapters, each approximately 1,400 words, written in an elegant, precise, and psychologically deep tone, from the third-person limited perspective of either Captain Hastings or Poirot. The story must incorporate Poirot's methodical and proud personality, a closed setting, such as a mansion or estate, and a circle of suspects with clear motives and secrets. Every clue must matter, and the resolution must rely on logic and psychology, culminating in a dramatic reveal. You have been asked to write Chapter 1, set at Ashwood Manor in Devon, September 1925, where a group has gathered for the engagement celebration of Celia Ashwood and Lawrence Cavendish. The chapter introduces the setting, characters, and an underlying tension, adhering to a classic British tone with formal dialogue and rich, suspenseful atmosphere. Below is the continuation of Chapter 1, ensuring it meets the 1,400-word target, maintains Poirot's character, and sets the stage for the mystery. Chapter 1, The Invitation to Ashwood Manor continued. Room. A quality that reassured Hastings, despite the faint unease that had begun to settle in his chest. He dressed carefully for dinner, choosing a crisp white shirt and his best dinner jacket, determined to uphold the standards of decorum that Poirot so admired. The manor's grandeur demanded nothing less, and Hastings, though no stranger to society, felt the weight of expectation in such a setting. Dinner was announced at precisely 8 o'clock, the butler's resonant voice summoning the guests to the dining room. The table was a vision of elegance, set with gleaming silver and crystal, the candlelight casting flickering shadows across the damask cloth. Sir Reginald presided at the head, his presence commanding yet genial, while Celia and Lawrence sat to his right, their hands occasionally brushing in a gesture that seemed both tender and deliberate. Lady Margaret, seated opposite, maintained her regal poise, her eyes darting between her niece and the other guests with a scrutiny that Hastings found faintly unnerving. Dr. Fowler, to her left, appeared distracted, his conversation limited to polite murmurs, while Mrs. Langley's laughter rang out a touch too brightly, as though compensating for some unspoken strain. Mr. Hargreaves, red-faced and jovial, regaled Miss Trent with tales of his legal triumphs, though her responses were sharp-witted and edged with irony. The meal progressed through courses of consommé, roasted business, pheasant, and a delicate lemon soufflé, each dish accompanied by wines from Sir Reginald's extensive cellar. Yet, as the evening wore on, Hastings noted small peculiarities that piqued his curiosity. Celia's smile, though radiant, faltered when Lawrence spoke of their future plans in London. Lady Margaret's fork paused mid-air as she overheard a murmured exchange between Dr. Fowler and Mrs. Langley about a delicate matter that required discretion. And Mr. Hargreaves, for all his bonhomie, seemed overly interested in the details of Sir Reginald's estate, his questions cloaked in casual banter, but probing nonetheless. As coffee was served in the drawing-room, the great hall clock chimed 10, and a stir at the door announced the arrival of Hercule Poirot. The little Belgian detective entered with his characteristic precision, his small, neat figure immaculate in a perfectly tailored suit, his moustache waxed to a faultless point. His eyes, bright and piercing, swept the room, taking in every detail with the acuity of a hawk. "Mes amis," he said, his voice rich with a faint French accent, "I regret my tardiness. A small matter in London detained me, but I am here now, and I thank Sir Reginald for his gracious invitation." The room came alive with curiosity. Sir Reginald rose to greet him, his handshake firm, but his expression guarded. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. We are honored to have you among us." Poirot inclined his head, his smile polite but enigmatic. "The honor is mine, Sir Reginald. A weekend in such charming company is a delight for Hercule Poirot." Yet as he took his seat, Hastings caught the familiar glint in his friend's eye, a sign that Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, cataloguing every glance, every gesture, every word. The conversation turned to lighter matters, Miss Trent's latest novel, the prospects for the hunting season, but Hastings, attuned to Poirot's methods, noticed his friend's subtle inquiries. Poirot asked Celia about her childhood at Ashwood, drawing out a wistful reminiscence of summers spent in the rose gardens, though her voice caught when she mentioned her late mother. To Lawrence, Poirot posed a seemingly innocuous question about his business ventures in London, eliciting a polished but vague response about investments of a speculative nature. Lady Margaret, when drawn into the conversation, spoke of the manor's history with pride, but deflected questions about recent family matters with a deft change of subject. As the evening drew to a close, the guests began to retire, their farewells tinged with the fatigue of a long day. Poirot, however, lingered, his guest in a possession, but here, beside the chair of Dr. Fowler. A trifling matter, perhaps, but Poirot does not believe in trifles. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. "Do you think it means something, Poirot?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Everything means something, mon ami. The question is what? The little grey cells, they are already stirring. Tomorrow we shall observe more closely. For now, rest mediocrity." Hastings caught his breath, his curiosity fully engaged. "I shall retire, Poirot. I suggest you do the same. The manor, it seems, is full of secrets." As they ascended the grand staircase to their rooms, the weight of Poirot's words settled over Hastings like a cloud. Ashwood Manor, with its polished surfaces and genteel company, was no mere backdrop for a celebration. It was a stage, and the players, Hastings sensed, were hiding more than they revealed. The stage was set, the curtain raised, and the mystery of Ashwood Manor had begun. Chapter 2. The Shadow Falls. The morning of September 11th, 1925, dawned over Ashwood Manor with a deceptive serenity.
the mist curling gently over the dew-kissed lawns, softening the edges of the ancient oaks that framed the estate. The air carried the faint scent of roses, but within the manor's walls, a darker note had begun to sound. Captain Hastings awoke early, his mind still turning over the peculiarities of the previous evening. The fleeting glances, the guarded words, and, above all, Poirot's quiet observation of the silver cigarette case. He dressed with care, sensing that the day would demand his full attention, and descended to the breakfast room, where the clink of porcelain and the murmur of conversation greeted him. The breakfast table was a study in strained civility. Sir Reginald presided with his usual hearty demeanour, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as he glanced toward his daughter, Celia, who sat pale and silent, her untouched plate of kedgeree a silent testament to her disquiet. Lawrence Cavendish, beside her, maintained an air of solicitous charm, though his hand lingered a fraction too long on Celia's arm, eliciting a subtle flinch. Lady Margaret, sipping her tea with glacial composure, observed the couple with a scrutiny that seemed to pierce the very air. Dr. Fowler, his nervous energy more pronounced, spilled a spoonful of sugar onto the tablecloth and hastened to brush it away, muttering an apology. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her laughter less effervescent than the previous night, toyed with a slice of toast, while Mr. Victor Hargreaves, ever robust, recounted a hunting anecdote that failed to lighten the mood. Miss Evelyn Trent, the novelist, scribbled notes in a small leather-bound book, her sharp eyes darting between her fellow guests as though collecting material for her next scandalous tale. Hercule Poirot, entering the room with his characteristic precision, brought a momentary hush. His impeccable suit, the gleam of his patent leather shoes, and the meticulous curl of his mustache seemed to command the space, as though the very atmosphere adjusted to his presence. "Bonjour, mes amis," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "A fine morning, is it not? The air of Devon, it is most invigorating for the little grey cells." He took his seat, accepting a cup of coffee from the butler with a nod of approval, and began to observe the company with his usual quiet intensity. Breakfast proceeded with the usual pleasantries, but the undercurrent of tension was palpable. Hastings, seated beside Poirot, noted his friend's subtle inquiries, delicate questions about the manor's history, the guest's connections to the Ashwood family, and the details of Celia and Lawrence's courtship. Each response was met with Poirot's polite smile, but Hastings knew that behind those keen eyes, every word was being weighed, every gesture catalogued. The morning's tranquility was shattered shortly after 10 o'clock, when a piercing scream echoed from the upper floors. The guests froze, their faces a tableau of shock and alarm. Sir Reginald leapt to his feet, his chair scraping against the polished floor. "Good God! What was that?" he demanded, already striding toward the door. The others followed, a hurried procession up the grand staircase, led by the butler, whose composure had given way to a rare agitation. The source of the scream was the east wing, where the family's private quarters were located. As they reached the landing, they found a housemaid, her face ashen, standing outside a heavy oak door. "It's Miss Celia, sir," she stammered, her hands trembling. She's gone." Sir Reginald pushed past her, flinging open the door to Celia's bedroom. The room was a vision of elegance. Soft pastel curtains, a canopied bed, a delicate writing desk, but it was empty. The bed was neatly made, untouched since the previous night, and Celia's dressing gown lay draped over a chair. A single rose, freshly cut, rested on the pillow, its crimson petals stark against the white linen. Lawrence Cavendish, his face drained of color, stepped forward, his voice hoarse. "Where is she? Celia! This can't be happening. Poirot, who had entered quietly behind the others, surveyed the scene with a calm that seemed almost unnatural. His eyes moved from the rose to the open window, where the curtains fluttered gently in the breeze. Mademoiselle Celia has not slept in this bed, he observed, his voice low but clear. The covers, they are undisturbed, and this rose. Housemaid's distress suggests otherwise. We must search the manor at once, and with method. Captain Hastings, will you assist? Hastings nodded, his heart pounding. The guests dispersed under Poirot's direction, searching the manor's sprawling rooms and grounds, but an hour's effort yielded no trace of Celia. The rose garden, the library, the conservatory, all were empty. Lawrence, increasingly frantic, insisted on checking the stables, while Dr. Fowler suggested she might have fainted somewhere secluded, his medical bag already in hand. Mrs. Langley, her composure crumbling, whispered to Miss Trent about a family matter that might explain Celia's absence, though she refused to elaborate. Mr. Hargreaves, meanwhile, remained oddly detached, offering practical suggestions but little emotion. As noon approached, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing-room, his expression grave. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice cutting through the murmurs of anxiety. "It is clear that Mademoiselle Celia has vanished under circumstances most unusual. The rose upon her pillow, it is a clue, perhaps a message. We must consider all possibilities. Accident, flight, or something more sinister." A gasp escaped Mrs. Langley, and Lawrence's fists clenched. "Sinister? You can't mean someone's taken her? Or worse?" His voice broke, and he turned away, his shoulders shaking. Poirot raised a hand, his demeanor calm but authoritative. "We speculate too soon, Monsieur Cavendish. First, we must establish the facts. When was Mademoiselle Celia last seen, and by whom?" The butler, recovering his professionalism, stepped forward. "Miss Celia retired to her room at 10:30 last night, sir. I saw her ascend the stairs myself." "And after that?" Poirot pressed, his eyes scanning the room. Silence fell, broken only by Lady Margaret's sharp intake of breath. "I spoke with her briefly at 11, she admitted, her tone reluctant. "A private matter concerning her engagement. She seemed distressed, but she assured me she was well." Poirot's moustache twitched slightly, a sign Hastings recognized as a spark of interest. "Distressed, madame? In what manner?" Lady Margaret hesitated, her fingers tightening on her shawl. "She was nervous, as any bride might be. I urged her to rest. That was all." Poirot nodded, but his eyes lingered on her, as though weighing the truth of her words. He turned to the others. "And you, mes amis? Did any of you see or hear Mademoiselle Celia after 11 o'clock? Heads shook. Voices murmured denials, but Hastings noted "There we shall examine every detail. The little grey cells, they demand precision." As the guests dispersed, their faces etched with worry, Hastings followed Poirot back to the east wing. The bedroom was as they had left it, the rose still lying on the pillow, its presence both beautiful and ominous. Poirot moved with deliberate care, inspecting the window, the floor, the desk. He paused at a small wastebasket, retrieving a crumpled piece of paper. Smoothing it out, he revealed a half-written note in Celia's elegant hand. "I cannot go on like this. The truth must—" The words ended abruptly, the pen stroke trailing off as though interrupted. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mon ami,
The plot, it thickens. This note, it is unfinished, yet it speaks of a burden, a secret. We must learn what Mademoiselle Celia could not bear to continue, and who, perhaps, ensured she did not. Hastings felt a chill, the weight of the mystery settling over him. Ashwood Manor, with its polished elegance, had become a labyrinth of hidden truths, and only Poirot's relentless logic could navigate its shadows. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The afternoon sun hung low over Ashwood Manor, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, as the household reeled from the shock of Celia Ashwood's disappearance. The air, once fragrant with roses, now seemed heavy with unspoken fears, and the grand estate, so welcoming the previous day, felt like a gilded cage. Captain Hastings, standing by the drawing-room window, watched the distant figures of the groundskeepers searching the far reaches of the estate, their movements futile against the vastness of the grounds. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft, deliberate tread of Hercule Poirot, who entered the room with the air of a man entirely at ease, yet wholly alert. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but resonant. "You are troubled, yes? But do not let the heart race ahead of the mind. The little grey cells, they must be given time to work." He adjusted his already impeccable tie, his green eyes scanning the room where the guests had gathered once more, their faces a mixture of anxiety and suspicion. Hastings turned to his friend, his brow furrowed. "Poirot, it's been hours, and no sign of Celia. That note you found, it's chilling. What if she's been harmed?" Poirot raised a hand, his expression serene yet commanding. "Patience, Hastings. The note, it is a clue, but not yet a conclusion. We must proceed with method. The disappearance of Mademoiselle Celia is no accident, I think, but neither is it certain that harm has befallen her. First, we must understand the people of this house, their motives, their secrets, their lies." The butler, Mr. Grayson, determination to maintain order.
"Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice strained. "I've telephoned the local constabulary. They'll send Inspector Reed within the hour. But I confess, I'm grateful you're here. Your reputation for solving such mysteries is unmatched." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching slightly.
"You are most kind, Sir Reginald, but Hercule Poirot does not rely on reputation alone. The truth, it hides in the details, the small things that others overlook. I shall begin my inquiries at once."
With the guests reluctantly seated for a light luncheon, Poirot took the opportunity to observe them closely, his questions cloaked in polite conversation. He turned first to Lawrence Cavendish, whose pallor and restless hands betrayed his distress.
"Monsieur Cavendish," Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing, "you and Mademoiselle Celia, you were to be married soon, yes? Tell me, if you please, of your last conversation with her. Every detail, it matters."
Lawrence hesitated, his dark eyes flickering toward the others before settling on Poirot. "Last night, after dinner, we spoke in the library. She was quiet, perhaps a little anxious about the wedding plans. I assured her everything would be fine. We parted around 10, and she said she was going to bed." Poirot's gaze sharpened.
"Anxious, you say? About the wedding, or something else?"
Lawrence's jaw tightened. "Just the usual nerves, I suppose. Celia's always been sensitive. She didn't mention anything specific." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to Lady Margaret, who sat rigidly at the table, her tea untouched.
"Madame, you spoke with your niece at 11, I believe. You mentioned she was distressed. Can you recall her exact words?"
Lady Margaret's eyes narrowed, but she answered with measured calm.
"Celia said she was tired and wished to rest. She mentioned feeling overwhelmed, but that's hardly unusual for a young woman about to marry. I advised her to sleep and not to dwell on trifles."
Trifles, Poirot repeated softly, as though savouring the word. And yet, madame, she has vanished. Perhaps what seemed a trifle to you was to her a matter most grave. A flush crept into Lady Margaret's cheeks, but she said nothing. Poirot's attention shifted to Dr. Fowler, whose nervous fidgeting had not abated. Doctor, as the family physician, you have known Mademoiselle Celia for many years, yes? Did she ever confide in you about her health, her state of mind? Dr. Fowler cleared his throat, his fingers drumming on the table. Celia was in good health, Monsieur Poirot. A bit delicate, perhaps, but nothing serious. As for her state of mind, she seemed preoccupied of late, but she never spoke of it directly. Poirot's eyes. Cousin, yes? Close to Mademoiselle Celia? Mrs. Langley's laugh was sharp, almost forced. Oh, Celia and I were like sisters when we were younger, but we've drifted apart. She's been so caught up with Lawrence and the engagement. I saw her last night, briefly, in the hall. She seemed distracted, but I thought nothing of it. Miss Evelyn Trent, who had been listening intently, closed her notebook with a snap. "If I may, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice laced with curiosity, "Celia did mention something odd to me yesterday afternoon. We were in the rose garden, and she said she felt as though someone was watching her. She laughed it off, but I could tell it unnerved her." Poirot's moustache quivered, a sign of keen interest. "Watching her, mademoiselle? Most interesting. And did she say who she suspected?" Miss Trent shook her head. "No, she changed the subject, but I've seen enough of human nature to know when someone's hiding something." Mr. Hargreaves, who had been silent, chuckled gruffly. "All this talk of feelings and suspicions, Celia's probably just taken a walk to clear her head. Young women can be dramatic, you know." Poirot's smile was polite but cold. "Dramatic, monsieur? Perhaps. But a young woman who leaves a note of despair and a rose upon her pillow does not vanish for drama alone. No, there is purpose here, and Hercule Poirot will find it." The meal concluded in uneasy silence, and Poirot excused himself to continue his examination of Celia's room, with Hastings in tow. The bedroom remained as they had left it, the rose still a stark contrast against the white pillow. Poirot moved with methodical precision, inspecting the window frame, the carpet, the desk. He paused at a small jewellery box, its lid slightly ajar, revealing a single pearl earring without its pair. "Curious," he murmured, holding it up to the light. "One earring, but not the other. And this box, it is not in its proper place. See, the dust on the desk, it shows where it was moved." Hastings frowned. "Moved? By Celia, perhaps? Or by another?" Poirot replied, his voice soft. He turned to the open window, where the curtains stirred. The window, it was open when we found the room, yet the maid insists it was closed when she last cleaned yesterday afternoon. Someone opened it, Hastings, and not, I think, by accident. They were interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Reed, a sturdy man with a no-nonsense demeanour, who entered with a constable in tow. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his tone respectful but wary. "Sir Reginald's told me you're taking an interest in this matter. I'll conduct a thorough search, but I'd appreciate your observations." Poirot bowed slightly. "Inspector, I am at your service, but let us be clear. This is no simple disappearance. The note, the rose, the ear puzzle is complete." As the inspector began his inquiries, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, we must watch closely. The guests, they are not what they seem. Each has a secret, and one, I suspect, knows more of Mademoiselle Celia's fate than they admit. Tonight we shall listen, we shall observe, and the little grey cells, they shall begin to unravel the truth." Hastings nodded, his heart heavy with foreboding. Ashwood Manor, with its elegance and charm, had become a stage for a mystery that grew darker by the hour, and only Poirot's relentless logic could pierce its shadows.
The questions begin. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Ashwood Manor, casting intricate patterns on the polished oak floors of the library, where Hercule Poirot had chosen to conduct his inquiries. The room, lined with shelves of leather-bound volumes and heavy with the scent of old paper and wax, provided a fitting backdrop for the detective's methodical approach. Captain Hastings stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, watching as Poirot arranged a small notebook and pencil on the table before him, with the precision of a surgeon preparing his instruments. The atmosphere was taut, the household still reeling from Celia Ashwood's disappearance, and the arrival of Inspector Reed had done little to ease the mounting tension. Poirot, immaculate in his black suit, his moustache gleaming under the chandelier's glow, surveyed the room with his characteristic calm. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, his voice low but clear. "The art of the inquiry, it is not merely to ask questions, but to listen to what is not said. The silences, the hesitations, the glances, they speak louder than words. Today we shall begin to uncover the truth of Mademoiselle Celia's fate." Inspector Reed, a practical man with a penchant for straightforward methods, had agreed to let Poirot conduct initial interviews, provided he shared his findings. The inspector was occupied with organizing a broader search of the estate's grounds, leaving Poirot free to probe the minds of the manor's inhabitants. One by one, the guests were summoned to the library, each entering with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. First came Sir Reginald Ashwood, his broad shoulders stooped with worry, his silver hair slightly dishevelled. He sat heavily in the chair opposite Poirot, his hands gripping the armrests. "Monsieur Poirot," he began, his voice gruff, "I don't know what you hope to find by questioning us. My daughter is missing, and we must focus on finding her, not playing parlour games." Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression remained grave. "Sir Reginald, the search for your daughter, it begins here, in the minds of those who knew her best. Tell me, if you please, of Mademoiselle—"
Reginald's jaw tightened. "Celia was quieter than usual, perhaps. She's always been a sensitive girl, prone to nerves. But she loved Lawrence, or so I believed. She never spoke of doubts, not to me." He paused, his eyes flickering to the window. "Though she did ask me about her mother's jewelry last week. She wanted to wear her mother's sapphire brooch for the wedding. I thought it sentimental, nothing more." Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with deliberate care. "The sapphire brooch, you say? And where is this brooch now?" "In the safe, in my study," Sir Reginald replied. "I checked it this morning after she vanished. It's still there." Poirot nodded, his face impassive. "Merci, Sir Reginald. You have been most helpful. I may call upon you again." Next was Lawrence Cavendish, whose agitation had not subsided. His dark eyes darted nervously as he took his seat, his fingers drumming on his knee. "Monsieur Poirot, I've told you everything I know. Celia and I spoke last night, and she was fine. Nervous, perhaps, but fine. I can't understand why she'd leave like this." Poirot leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur Cavendish, let us be precise. You say Mademoiselle Celia was nervous. Did she speak of anyone troubling her? A disagreement, perhaps, or a fear?" Lawrence hesitated, his lips parting as though to speak, then closing again. "No, nothing specific. She was just overwhelmed, I think. The wedding, the attention, it was a lot for her." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "she left a note, unfinished, speaking of a truth she could not bear. What truth, monsieur? Did she confide in you?" Lawrence's face paled. "No, I swear she didn't. If she was hiding something, she kept it from me. Poirot's moustache twitched, but he said nothing more, dismissing Lawrence with a polite nod. Lady Margaret followed, her regal bearing unshaken despite the circumstances. She sat with the poise of a queen, her hands folded in her lap. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cool, "I trust you do not intend to waste my time with idle speculation. Celia is a fragile girl, and this disappearance is likely a momentary lapse. She will return when she is ready." Poirot's smile was courteous but unyielding. "Madame, fragility does not explain a rose left on a pillow, nor an open window, nor an unfinished note. You spoke with Mademoiselle Celia at 11 last night. What precisely did you discuss?" Lady Margaret's eyes narrowed. "As I said, a private matter. She was anxious about her engagement."
Unusual. The house was quiet. Poirot made another note, his expression unreadable. Dr. Ernest Fowler was next, his nervous demeanor more pronounced under Poirot's scrutiny. "Doctor," Poirot began, "you have known Mademoiselle Celia since childhood. Did she ever speak to you of fears, of enemies, of anything that might explain her disappearance?" Dr. Fowler's laugh was brittle. "Celia? Enemies? No, no. She was a gentle soul, though she did come to me a fortnight ago, complaining of sleeplessness. I prescribed a mild sedative, but she refused to take it, said she didn't want to dull her mind." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Her mind, you say? Was she troubled by something specific?" Dr. Fowler shifted uncomfortably. "She didn't say. But she seemed preoccupied, as I told you. I thought it was just nerves about the wedding." The interviews continued with Mrs. Beatrice Langley, whose forced cheerfulness had given way to a strained expression. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "Celia and I were close once, but lately she's been distant. Last night when I saw her in the hall, she seemed frightened. I asked what was wrong, but she just shook her head and hurried to her room." "Frightened," Poirot murmured. "Did she look at anyone, madame? Did she mention a name?" "No," Mrs. Langley replied, her eyes darting to the door. "But I had the sense she was avoiding someone." Miss Evelyn Trent, the last to be questioned, entered with a spark of defiance in her eyes. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I'm a writer, so I notice things. Celia was uneasy yesterday, not just in the rose garden, but all day. She kept glancing at the windows, as if expecting to see someone outside. And that note you found, it's not the first time she's written something like that. I saw her scribbling in her diary a week ago, then tearing out the page." Poirot leaned forward, his interest piqued. "A diary, mademoiselle? And where is this diary now?" Miss Trent shrugged. "I don't know. She always kept it with her. If it's not in her room, then perhaps she took it with her." As the interviews concluded, Poirot closed his notebook with a soft snap. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, "we have learned much, and yet we know so little. Each person, they tell a truth, but it is a truth with shadows. The note, the rose, the earring, the window, and now perhaps a missing diary. These are the threads, mon ami, and we must weave them together." Hastings, his mind... "Poirot?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. "That, mon ami, is what we shall discover. The little grey cells, they are awake, and the truth, it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." Chapter 5. The Red Herrings.
The twilight of September 11th, 1925, settled over Ashwood Manor like a velvet shroud, deepening the shadows within its ancient walls and lending an air of foreboding to the already tense household. The search for Celia Ashwood had yielded no new leads, and Inspector Reed's men, combing the estate's grounds, had returned with nothing but muddy boots and grim expressions. Captain Hastings, standing by the library window, felt the weight of the day's events pressing upon him, his earlier optimism replaced by a gnawing unease. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a picture of composure, his small figure seated at the library table, his notebook open before him, his pencil poised like a conductor's baton. "Mon ami?" Poirot said, his voice cutting through Hastings' reverie. "You are troubled, yes, but do not let the heart cloud the mind. The truth, it is like a diamond, hidden beneath layers of distraction, but always there for those who know where to look." Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. "Poirot, we've questioned everyone, searched the manor, and still no sign of Celia. That note, the rose, the earring, it's all so cryptic, and now the inspector seems convinced Lawrence is to blame. He's been asking pointed questions about his finances and his past." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "The good Inspector Reed, he is a man of action, but he lacks the finesse of the little grey cells. Monsieur Cavendish, he is an obvious suspect, n'est-ce pas? The fiancé, the man closest to Mademoiselle Celia, with a past that is, how shall we say, less than transparent. But the obvious, Hastings, it is often a distraction, a red herring, designed to lead us astray." Hastings frowned. "You don't think Lawrence is involved?" "I think," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming, "that we must consider all possibilities, but we must not be seduced by the easy answer. Let us examine the facts, and then we shall see." The library door opened, and Inspector Reed entered, his face set in a determined scowl. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I've just had a word with Cavendish's solicitor in London, via telephone. Seems our young man's been in financial trouble. Debts piling up, investments gone sour. He stands to gain a tidy sum from Celia's inheritance once they're married. Motive enough, wouldn't you say?" Poirot inclined head.
Not a trace. We've searched her room again, the gardens, even the attics. If she had a diary, it's either well hidden or gone with her." Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with deliberate precision. "And the grounds? Any sign of disturbance? Of a struggle?" "Nothing conclusive," Reed admitted. "A few broken twigs near the rose garden, but that could be the gardeners. We're still looking." As Reed departed to oversee the evening search, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The inspector, he sees a motive and builds a case. But Hercule Poirot, he looks for the pattern. The broken twigs, the missing diary, the open window, these are not random. They are part of a design, and we must find its shape." The evening brought the household together for a strained dinner, the absence of Celia a palpable void at the table. Sir Reginald, his face etched with worry, barely touched his food, while Lady Margaret maintained her icy composure, her eyes darting to Lawrence with thinly veiled suspicion. Dr. Fowler, his nervous energy unabated, spilled his wine and apologized profusely, drawing a sharp glance from Mrs. Langley, who seemed on the verge of tears. Miss Trent, ever observant, watched the scene with a writer's detachment, her pen poised over her notebook. Mr. Hargreaves alone seemed unaffected, his hearty appetite undiminished as he complimented the chef on the roast. Poirot, seated at the far end of the table, observed the interplay with his usual quiet intensity. He addressed the group with disarming politeness. "Mesdames et messieurs, I understand this is a time of great distress, but I must ask, has anyone recalled anything new about last night? A sound, perhaps, or a glimpse of Mademoiselle Celia after 11?
A heavy silence followed, broken only by Lawrence's sharp intake of breath. "I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't see her after 10. I was in my room reading until midnight." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Reading, monsieur? And what book, may I ask?" Lawrence hesitated, his fingers tightening on his glass. Novel. One of Miss Trent's, actually. The Shadowed Veil. I found it in the library." Miss Trent raised an eyebrow, her lips curving in a faint smile. "I'm flattered, Mr. Cavendish, though I'd have thought you'd prefer something less sensational, given the circumstances." The table stirred with uneasy laughter, but Poirot's gaze remained fixed on Lawrence.
"And your room, monsieur? It is in the west wing, yes? Far from Mademoiselle Celia's? You heard nothing? No footsteps? No voices?"
"Nothing," Lawrence insisted, his voice firm but his eyes avoiding Poirot's. Poirot turned to Dr. Fowler, who was mopping his brow with a napkin.
"And you, doctor? Your room is closer to the east wing. Did you hear anything unusual?"
Dr. Fowler's hand trembled slightly. "I was asleep by 11. I took a sedative myself. Helps with—"
"If there was anything, I didn't hear it." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and moved on to Mrs. Langley. "Madame, you mentioned seeing Mademoiselle Celia in the hall, looking frightened. Can you recall the exact time?" Mrs. Langley's eyes widened, as though caught off guard. "It was just before 11, I think. I was on my way to my room. She was hurrying, almost running, toward the staircase." "And she said nothing?" Poirot pressed. "No," Mrs. Langley replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "She just looked at me, and then she was gone." The meal concluded in a heavy silence, and as the guests dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, do you see how the stories, they do not align? Monsieur Cavendish claims to have been reading, yet his hesitation betrays him. Dr. Fowler, he takes a sedative, yet his nerves are as frayed as ever. And Madame Langley, her memory of the time, it shifts like sand. These are the red herrings, Hastings, the half-truths that obscure the path to the truth." They returned to Celia's room, where Poirot resumed his examination with relentless focus. He paused at the fireplace, where a faint smudge of ash caught his eye. Kneeling, he inspected the hearth, retrieving a small, charred fragment of paper. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, holding it to the light. The fragment bore a single word in Celia's hand. "Betrayed." Hastings gasped. "Betrayed? Poirot, this changes everything. Someone in this house. She must have meant someone close to her." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. "Oui, mon ami. But who? And why? The word. It is a cry from the heart, but it is also a clue. We must find the rest of this paper, and we must learn what betrayal drove Mademoiselle Celia to such despair." As they left the room, the manor seemed to close in around them, its grandeur a facade for the secrets it held. Hastings felt a chill, the weight of the mystery deepening with every step. Poirot, however, walked with the confidence of a man who knew the truth was within his grasp, if only he could untangle the web of lies that surrounded it. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The evening of September 11th, 1925, cloaked Ashwood Manor in a stillness that belied the turmoil within its walls. The disappearance of Celia Ashwood had cast a pall over the household, and the guests, though maintaining a facade of decorum, moved with the wariness of those who sensed danger lurking in the shadows. Captain Hastings, standing by the drawing-room window, watched the last rays of sunlight fade over the Devon hill. Voice cutting through the quiet. "You are restless, yes? But the little grey cells, they thrive in such moments. The clues,
They are like the pieces of a mosaic, each small, but together they form a picture, and today we have found a piece most intriguing." Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. "You mean the burned paper, Poirot? That word, betrayed, it's chilling, but it's so vague. Who betrayed Celia, and where's the rest of the note?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "Patience, Hastings. The word, it is a spark, but the fire, it lies in the details. Come, let us return to Mademoiselle Celia's room. There is something I must verify, a small matter, but to Hercule Poirot, there are no small matters." The two men ascended the grand staircase, the manor's silence broken only by the creak of polished wood beneath their feet. Celia's room, bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp, seemed frozen in time. The rose on the pillow a silent accusation. Poirot moved with his usual precision, his eyes scanning the room as though seeing it anew. He paused at the writing desk, with a faint scratch mark and ink blot had caught his attention earlier. Kneeling, he examined the floor beneath, his fingers brushing the carpet, until they closed around a small, glinting object. A broken pen nib, its tip stained with ink. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, holding the nib to the light. "This is the pen that wrote the note, I think. It broke, perhaps in haste, and was discarded. But why here beneath the desk and not in the wastebasket? It suggests an interruption, sudden and urgent." Hastings frowned, his mind racing. "An interruption? You mean someone came into the room while she was writing?" "Précisément," Poirot replied, his voice low. "And this interruption, it was not a casual visit. The note, the word betrayed, they speak of a confrontation, a moment of crisis. We must find the rest of this note, for it holds the key to Mademoiselle Celia's fate." Poirot's attention shifted to the fireplace. Where the charred fragment had been found, he knelt again, sifting through the ashes with a small silver tool from his pocket. After a moment, he retrieved another tiny scrap, this one bearing a partial sentence. "Cannot forgive." He held it up, his expression grave. "Another piece, Hastings. The mosaic grows clearer. Mademoiselle Celia was writing of a betrayal she could not forgive, but who and why?" Before Hastings could respond, a soft knock at the door announced the arrival of the butler, Mr. Grayson, his face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "Inspector Reed requests your presence in the study. He's found something in Mr. Cavendish's room that he believes you should see." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he rose with a nod. "Very well, Monsieur Grayson, lead the way." The study, a masculine room of dark wood and leather-bound ledgers, was a hive of quiet activity. Inspector Reed stood by the desk, holding a small bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. Lawrence Cavendish, his face flushed with indignation, stood nearby, his hands clenched. "This is outrageous," Lawrence protested. "Those are private letters, Inspector. You've no right to rummage through my things." Reed's expression was unyielding. "Private or not, Mr. Cavendish, these letters suggest you've been less than honest. They're from a certain Miss Clara Wentworth, and they speak of debts you owe her, large ones. Care to explain?" Lawrence's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. "Inspector, may I see these letters, if you please?" Reed handed them over, and Poirot examined them with meticulous care, his eyes scanning the elegant handwriting. "Most interesting," he murmured. "The letters, they are indeed from a lady, and they mention sums of money, but they are vague, are they not? No specific demands, no threats, and the postmark, London, dated 2 months ago. Tell me, Monsieur Cavendish, who is this Miss Wentworth?" Lawrence's shoulders slumped, his defiance giving way to resignation. "She's an acquaintance from London. I borrowed money from her to settle some business debts. It's nothing to do with Celia, I swear." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet, monsieur, you did not mention this acquaintance before. A man with debts, engaged to a wealthy heiress. It is a motive, is it not, that the inspector finds compelling?" Lawrence's voice rose tinged with desperation. I loved Celia. I'd never harm her, debts or no debts. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and handed the letters back to read. We shall keep these in mind, Inspector. But let us not be too quick to judge. The letters, they are a clue, but they are not the truth. As they left the study, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. Mon ami, the letters, they are another red herring, I think. Monsieur Cavendish is distressed, yes, but his distress is that of a man who fears exposure, not necessarily guilt. We must look elsewhere for the truth. They returned to the library, where Poirot resumed his study of the charred fragments. He placed the two scraps side by side, his fingers tracing the edges. The paper. It is of fine quality, the same as that in Mademoiselle Celia's desk. The ink, it matches the blot we found. But the burning, why? To destroy evidence or to draw attention to it? Hastings shook his head, bewildered. Draw attention? But who would want us to find these fragments? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Someone who wishes to control a private word with Miss Evelyn Trent, whose sharp observations had intrigued him. She entered the library with her usual confidence, her notebook tucked under her arm. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her tone light but wary, I assume you want to know more about Celia's diary? Poirot smiled, his demeanor disarming. Mademoiselle, your perception, it is remarkable. Yes, the diary. You saw Mademoiselle Celia tear out a page. Can you recall anything of its contents? Miss Trent hesitated, her eyes narrowing. It was a week ago, in the rose garden. She was writing quickly, almost frantically, then tore the page out and stuffed it into her pocket. I couldn't read it, but I saw the word truth before she hid it. She looked frightened, as though she regretted writing it at all. Poirot made a note, his expression thoughtful. And the diary itself, mademoiselle? You are certain it was not in her room? I can't be sure, Miss Trent admitted. But Celia was never without it. If it's gone, she either took it or someone else did. Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a polite bow. As she left, he turned to Hastings, his voice low and intense. The diary, Hastings, it is the key. The note, the fragments, they are but echoes of what Mademoiselle Celia wrote in that book. We must find it, for it holds the truth of her betrayal. Hastings felt a chill, the manor's grandeur fading into a labyrinth of secrets. Poirot's relentless logic was peeling back the layers, but the truth remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of Ashwood Manor. The night. The night of September 11th, 1925, wrapped Ashwood Manor in a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling or the distant hoot of an owl in the Devon woods. The disappearance of Celia Ashwood had transformed the estate from a place of celebration to one of suspicion, and the air was thick with unspoken accusations. Captain Hastings, unable to sleep, paced the corridor outside his room, his mind churning with the day's revelations. The broken pen nib, the charred fragments, the letters implicating Lawrence Cavendish. Hercule Poirot, however, remained in the library, his small figure illuminated by a single lamp as he pored over his notes, his little grey cells working tirelessly to untangle the web of deceit. As dawn broke on September the 12th, the household gathered for a subdued breakfast, the absence of Celia a wound that refused to heal. Sir Reginald, his face etched with exhaustion, spoke little, his eyes fixed on the empty chair where his daughter should have sat. Lawrence Cavendish, pale and drawn, avoided the gazes of the others, his earlier defiance replaced by a quiet desperation. Lady Margaret maintained her regal composure, but her hands trembled slightly as she poured her tea. Dr. Fowler's nervous tics were more pronounced, his fingers shredding a napkin into fragments. Mrs. Beatrice
Langley, her eyes red-rimmed, seemed on the verge of collapse, while Miss Evelyn Trent watched the scene with a writer's keen eye, her notebook ever present. Mr. Hargreaves, alone, seemed untouched by the tension, his hearty appetite a stark contrast to the mood. Poirot entered the room with his usual precision, his suit immaculate, his mustache a perfect curl. "Bonjour, mes amis," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of authority. "The night, it has brought no news of Mademoiselle Celia. But Hercule Poirot, he does not despair. The truth It is close, if only we look with clear eyes. Hastings, seated beside him, leaned closer. Poirot, have you found something new? That fragment. Cannot forgive. It's haunting me. What could Celia not forgive? Poirot's eyes gleamed, but he raised a hand for silence as Inspector Reed entered, his expression grim. Monsieur Poirot, Reed said, we've searched the grounds again and there's still no sign of Miss Ashwood. But we did find something in the rose garden. A woman's glove, near the broken twigs we noted yesterday. It's silk, monogrammed with a C. A murmur rippled through the room and Lawrence's head snapped up. Celia's glove. Where is it? Let me see it. Reed produced the glove, a delicate white silk piece with a small embroidered C at the wrist. Lawrence's face drained of color. That's hers, he whispered. She wore it yesterday afternoon. But why was it in the garden? Poirot took the glove, examining it with care. Most interesting, Inspector. The glove, it is clean, save for a faint stain, earth, perhaps, or something else. And the monogram, it is indeed C, but let us not assume too quickly. Many things may bear the initial of Mademoiselle Celia. His eyes flicked to Mrs. Langley, whose maiden name, Hastings recalled, was also a C, Beatrice Carver. Mrs. Langley flushed under Poirot's gaze. Don't look at me like that, Monsieur Poirot. I haven't worn silk gloves in years. That's Celia's, I'm sure of it. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and handed the glove back to Reed. We shall keep this in mind, but let us continue our inquiries. The glove, it is a clue, but it is also a distraction unless we understand its context. As breakfast concluded, Poirot requested private interviews in the library, beginning with Mrs. Langley, whose fragile composure seemed to fray further under his scrutiny. She sat nervously, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. Madame, Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing, you said you saw Mademoiselle Celia in the hall last night, looking frightened. Can you recall anything more? A sound, perhaps, or a glimpse of another person? Mrs. Langley's eyes darted to the door. Servant, but now I'm not sure. Poirot made a note, his pencil moving with deliberate care. A door closing, madame. Most significant. And you are certain of the time? Yes, she said, her voice trembling. I couldn't sleep, so I was awake. Reading. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Reading, madame, like Monsieur Cavendish, who was also reading at midnight? Curious, how many of this household find solace in books at such an hour? Mrs. Langley flushed, but said nothing, and Poirot dismissed her with a polite nod. Next came Dr. Fowler, whose nervous energy seemed to intensify in the detective's presence. Doctor, Poirot said, you mentioned prescribing a sedative for Mademoiselle Celia, which she refused. Did she give a reason for her refusal? Dr. Fowler's hands fidgeted with his cufflinks. She said she needed to stay alert, that she had something important to do. I didn't press her. She was always a private girl. Something important, Poirot repeated, his eyes narrowing. And you, doctor, you took a sedative yourself that night. Yet you seem far from rested. Why is that? Dr. Fowler's laugh was brittle. It's this house, Monsieur Poirot. The tension, the worry. It's enough to keep anyone awake, sedative or no. Poirot's moustache twitched, but he moved on, calling Miss Trent next. The novelist entered with her usual confidence, her sharp eyes meeting Poirot's without flinching. Mademoiselle, he said, you have a gift for observation. You mentioned Mademoiselle Celia's diary, and the word truth you glimpsed. Can you recall anything else about her behavior in the days before her disappearance? Miss Trent leaned back, her expression thoughtful. Celia was distracted, almost secretive. 2 days ago, I saw her in the library, reading a letter. She hid it when she noticed me, but I caught a glimpse of the signature. C.W. I assumed it was from Mr. Cavendish, but now I'm not so sure. Poirot's eyes gleamed. C.W., you say, most intriguing. And the letter, it upset her? Yes, Miss Trent replied.
She looked pale, almost angry. She left the library in a hurry, clutching the letter. As the interviews concluded, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. "Mon ami, the lies, they multiply. Madame Langley hears a door at midnight, yet no one admits to moving. Dr. Fowler speaks of Celia's need to stay alert, yet he conceals his own unrest. And Mademoiselle Trent, she sees a letter with initials that may not belong to Monsieur Cavendish. These are the threads of deceit, Hastings, and they lead us closer to the truth." They returned to
This stain on the glove, it is not earth, but oil, the kind used in a lamp or a machine. Hastings gasped. Oil? But what does it mean, Poirot? It means, Poirot replied, his voice soft but intense, that someone was in this garden last night. Someone who carried a lamp, perhaps to meet Mademoiselle Celia. The glove, the footprint, the letter, they are pieces of a puzzle, and the picture it begins to form. As they returned to the manor, the weight of the mystery pressed heavier on Hastings. The lies, the half-truths, the hidden motives, each revelation only deepened the shadows of Ashwood Manor, and only Poirot's relentless logic could hope to pierce them. Word count, 1400. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The morning of September 12, 1925, broke over Ashwood Manor with a chill that seemed to seep into the very bones of the house. The relentless search for Celia Ashwood had yielded no further trace, and the atmosphere among the guests had grown brittle, each polite exchange laced with suspicion. Captain Hastings, standing in the conservatory where the morning light filtered through glass panes and lush greenery, felt the weight of the mystery pressing harder than ever. The clues, the unfinished note, the charred fragments, the oil-stained glove, the mysterious footprint, had only deepened the enigma, and the household teetered on the edge of collapse. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a beacon of calm, his small figure moving through the manor with the precision of a clockmaker, his little gray cells tirelessly assembling the puzzle. As the guests gathered for a late breakfast, the strain was palpable. Sir Reginald, his face gaunt with worry, barely spoke, his eyes fixed on a distant point beyond the dining room's ornate walls. Lawrence Cavendish, his earlier defiance eroded by sleeplessness, sat hunched, his hands gripping his coffee cup as though it were an anchor. Lady Margaret's regal facade showed cracks, her lips pursed tightly as she glanced at the others. Dr. Fowler's nervous tics had worsened, his fingers shredding yet another napkin, while Mrs. Beatrice Langley's eyes were red and swollen, her forced cheer replaced by a fragile silence. Miss Evelyn Trent, ever observant, scribbled in her notebook, her sharp gaze missing nothing. Mr. Hargreaves, though still hearty, seemed subdued, his usual anecdotes absent. Poirot entered the room with his customary poise, his suit immaculate, his mustache a perfect curve. "Bonjour, mes amis," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that stilled the room. "The situation, it is grave. But Hercule Poirot does not despair. The truth, it is near, if only we have the courage to face it." Hastings, seated beside him, leaned closer. "Stars in the night sky. Each shines alone, but together they form a constellation. Today we shall see a truth revealed, for someone in this house can no longer bear the weight of their secret." The meal was interrupted by sudden commotion from the hall. The butler, Mr. Grayson, appeared, his composure shaken. "Sir Reginald, Monsieur Poirot, you must come at once. It's Mrs. Langley. She's in the drawing-room and she's in a state." The guests rose as one, following Grayson to the drawing-room, where Mrs. Beatrice Langley stood by the fireplace, her face streaked with tears, her hands clutching a crumpled letter. "I can't keep it in any longer," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "It's my fault. Oh God, it's my fault." Poirot stepped forward, his demeanor calm but commanding. "Madame Langley, compose yourself if you please. What is his fault you speak of? And this letter, what does it contain?" Mrs. Langley's hands trembled as she handed the letter to Poirot. "It's from Celia," she whispered. I found it in my room this morning, slipped under the door. I didn't want to say anything, but I can't bear it anymore." Poirot unfolded the letter with care, his eyes scanning the elegant handwriting. He read aloud, his voice steady. "Beatrice, I know what you have done. I saw you in the garden with him, and I cannot forgive you. If you have any honor, you will tell the truth before it's too late. Celia." A gasp rippled through the room. Lawrence's face darkened, his fists clenching. "What does this mean, Beatrice? What were you doing in the garden? And with whom?" Mrs. Langley sank into a chair, her sobs intensifying. "It was nothing like she thought. I was in the rose garden 2 nights ago with Dr. Fowler. We were talking, that's all. Celia must have seen us and misunderstood." Dr. Fowler, his face ashen, stepped forward, his voice trembling. "It's true, Monsieur Poirot. Beatrice and I were discussing a private matter, a family matter. Celia must have seen us from her window and jumped to conclusions." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "A family matter, Doctor? And what matter was so urgent that it required a midnight meeting in the rose garden?" Dr. Fowler hesitated, his eyes darting to Mrs. Langley. "It was about money. Beatrice needed advice about an investment I was trying to help." Mrs. Langley nodded, her voice barely audible. "It's true. I've been in financial trouble and Ernest, Dr. Fowler, was helping me sort it out. Celia must have thought— Oh, I don't know what she thought." Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes narrowing. "And this letter, madame, you say it was slipped under your door this morning? Yet Mademoiselle Celia has been missing since last night. How do you explain this?" Mrs. Langley's eyes widened, her hands twisting the handkerchief. I don't know. Perhaps she wrote it before." "She disappeared, and someone placed it there later. I swear I don't know." Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable. "Most interesting. And you, doctor, you confirmed this meeting in the garden. At what time, precisely?" Dr. Fowler swallowed hard. "Around midnight, 2 nights ago. We spoke for perhaps 10 minutes, no more." Poirot nodded, turning to the others. "Mesdames et messieurs, this letter, it is a revelation, but it raises more questions than it answers. Why did Mademoiselle Celia write of betrayal? And who placed this letter under Madame Langley's door? We must proceed with care, for the truth, it is close." As the guests dispersed, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, the emotional outburst of Madame Langley, it is significant, but it is also a performance, perhaps. The letter, it is genuine, I think, but its delivery most curious. And the meeting with Dr. Fowler, it is too convenient, too neatly explained." Hastings frowned, his mind racing. "You think they're lying, Poirot? But why would Beatrice break down like that if it wasn't true?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The tears, they are real. But the motive, it may be false. Madame Langley wishes to control the narrative, to direct our attention. And Dr. Fowler, his nervousness, it is not merely guilt, but fear. We must look deeper." They returned to the rose garden, where Poirot examined the spot where the glove and footprint had been found. He knelt, his fingers brushing the soil, and paused at a small, overlooked detail. A tiny shard of glass glinting in the morning light. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, holding it up. "Glass, from a lantern, perhaps. The oil on the glove, the footprint, and now this. They tell a story of a nighttime meeting, but not the one Madame Langley describes." Hastings gasped. "A lantern? So someone was out here with a light, maybe to meet Celia?" "Précisément," Poirot replied, his voice soft but intense. "And this glass, it is not from the manor's lanterns, which are of brass and crystal. This is common, perhaps from a portable lamp. Someone came prepared, Hastings, as they wished to remain unseen." As they returned to the manor, Poirot's mind was clearly at work, piecing together the fragments of the mystery. The letter, the glove, the glass. They are threads in a tapestry of deceit.
Madame Langley's confession, it is a partial truth, designed to obscure a greater one. We must find Mademoiselle Celia's diary, for it will reveal the heart of this betrayal." Hastings felt a chill. The manor's elegance
Chapter 9. The Trap. The afternoon of September 12, 1925, hung heavy over Ashwood Manor, the air thick with the scent of impending rain as clouds gathered over the Devon hills. The disappearance of Celia Ashwood had stretched the nerves of the household to breaking, and the revelation of Mrs. Beatrice Langley's letter had ignited a fire of suspicion that threatened to consume the fragile civility of the guests. Captain Hastings, standing in the library where Hercule Poirot had made his temporary headquarters, felt a knot of apprehension in his chest. The clues, the oil-stained glove, the footprint, the shard of glass, the charred fragments were mounting, yet the truth remained tantalizingly out of reach. Poirot, however, sat at the table with his notebook open, his small hands folded, his eyes gleaming with the quiet intensity of a hunter closing in on his quarry. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate, "the time has come to tighten the net. The little gray cells, they have been busy, and now we must apply the pressure. Tonight we shall gather the household, and Hercule Poirot will set a trap. Not for a fox, but for the truth." Hastings frowned, his mind racing. "A trap, Poirot? You mean to confront them all? But what if it pushes the guilty party to do something drastic?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "That, Hastings, is precisely the point. The guilty, they are like a cornered animal. When pressed, they reveal themselves. We shall observe, we shall listen, and the truth, it will emerge from the shadows." The day passed in a flurry of activity, with Inspector Reed's men continuing their search of the grounds, though their efforts yielded little beyond trampled grass and weary expressions. Poirot, meanwhile, spent the afternoon in quiet contemplation, occasionally pacing the library or examining his notes with meticulous care. Hastings, ever loyal, followed his friend's lead, though he could not shake the feeling that the manor was a powder keg awaiting a spark. As evening fell, Poirot requested that the household gather in the drawing-room after dinner. The room, with its heavy drapes and flickering firelight, seemed to close in around the guests as they took their seats, their faces a study in unease. Sir Reginald, his eyes hollow with grief, sat by the hearth, his hands clasped tightly. Lawrence Cavendish, his earlier defiance replaced by a haggard intensity, stood near the window, his gaze distant. Lady Margaret, her regal poise strained, sat with her hands folded, her lips a thin line.
Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small figure commanding the room, with an authority that belied his stature. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resonant, "the disappearance of Mademoiselle Celia Ashwood is a puzzle, but it is one that Hercule Poirot will solve. Tonight we shall examine the facts, and I ask you to listen carefully. For the truth, it is among us." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room, lingering on each face, as though reading their thoughts. "Let us begin with the clues. A note, unfinished, speaking of truth Mademoiselle Celia could not bear. A rose, left on her pillow, not from the vase in her room. A single pearl earring, its pair missing. A glove, stained with oil, found in the rose garden. A footprint, small, but distinct. A shard of glass from a common lantern, and now a letter, accusing Madame Langley of a betrayal. These are the pieces of our mosaic, and they tell a story." Lawrence shifted uncomfortably, his voice sharp. "Get to the point, Monsieur Poirot. Are you accusing someone? Because I've had enough of these insinuations. Poirot raised a hand, his demeanor unruffled. Patience, Monsieur Cavendish. The accusations, they come in time. But first, we must understand. Let us consider the night of Mademoiselle Celia's disappearance. Madame Langley, you heard a door close at midnight. Dr. Fowler, you claim to have been asleep, yet your nerves betray you. Mademoiselle Trent, you saw a letter signed C.W. that upset Mademoiselle Celia. And Monsieur Cavendish, you were reading, yet you hesitate when asked for details. These are contradictions, mes amis, and contradictions, they lead to the truth. Lady Margaret's voice was icy. This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. You're suggesting we're all liars when Celia might simply have run off. She was a sensitive girl prone to hysterics. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Hysterics, madame? No, Mademoiselle Celia was not hysterical. She was frightened, betrayed, and her words, "I cannot forgive," speak of a wound most deep. Let us consider another detail, the sapphire brooch mentioned by Sir Reginald. It remains in the safe, yes? But why did Mademoiselle Celia ask for it, only to leave it behind? Sir Reginald stirred, his voice hoarse. It was her mother's. She wanted to wear it for the wedding. I told her it was safe, but she seemed insistent. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful, insistent. And yet she did not take it. Perhaps because she knew she would not need it. Or perhaps because someone else had plans for it. A tense silence fell, broken only by Dr. Fowler's nervous cough. Monsieur Poirot, what are you implying? That someone stole the brooch? Or, worse? Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. I imply nothing, Doctor.
The footprint. It is not Mademoiselle Celia's size, but smaller. Perhaps Madame Langley's, or another's. And I observe that the letter accusing Madame Langley appeared this morning, when Mademoiselle Celia has been gone since last night. Someone, mes amis, is playing a game, and Hercule Poirot, he does not play games. Mrs. Langley gasped, her handkerchief pressed to her mouth. You think I'm lying? I told you everything. The letter, it was slipped under my door. Poirot's voice softened, but his eyes were sharp. And who slipped it, madam? Who wished to direct our attention to you, or perhaps to distract us from another truth? The room seemed to hold its breath, the fire's crackle, the only sound. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us imagine a scenario. Mademoiselle Celia, she discovers a betrayal, a secret that threatens her future. She writes a note, but is interrupted. She goes to the rose garden, perhaps to meet someone, carrying a lantern. There, something happens, a confrontation, a struggle. The glove is dropped, the lantern breaks, and Mademoiselle Celia, she vanishes. Lawrence's face flushed with anger. This is nonsense. If there was a struggle, where's the evidence? Where's Celia? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The evidence, monsieur, it is here, in this room, in your words, your silences, your lies. Someone knows what happened to Mademoiselle Celia, and tonight, Hercule Poirot will find them. As the guests exchanged uneasy glances, Poirot's trap began to close, the pressure of his words stirring the hidden currents of guilt and fear. Hastings, watching his friend, felt a surge of admiration and dread. The truth was near, but at what cost would it be revealed? Chapter 10. The Reveal. The drawing-room of Ashwood Manor, bathed in the flickering glow of the fire on the evening of September 12th, 1925,
seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled guests. The air was thick with tension, the weight of Celia Ashwood's disappearance pressing down on the household like a storm cloud ready to burst. Captain Hastings, seated near the door, felt his heart race, his eyes fixed on Poirot, whose small, immaculate figure commanded the room with an authority that belied his stature. The clues, the unfinished note, the rose, the oil-stained glove, the footprint, the charred—
Reginald's face was haggard, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. Lawrence Cavendish, pale and tense, stood by the window, his eyes darting to the door as though contemplating escape. Lady Margaret's regal composure was strained, her lips a thin line. Dr. Fowler's nervous tics had intensified, his fingers shredding a handkerchief. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, still shaken from her earlier confession, clutched her shawl, her eyes red-rimmed. Miss Evelyn Trent's pen hovered over her notebook, her gaze sharp and expectant. Mr. Hargreaves, his usual joviality absent, frowned into his glass of port. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us begin with the facts. Mademoiselle Celia vanished on the night of September 10th. Her bed was untouched, a rose lay on her pillow, a note spoke of a truth she could not bear, and a fragment in the fireplace bore the word betrayed. A glove, stained with oil, was found in the rose garden near a footprint and a shard of glass from a common lantern. A letter accusing Madame Langley appeared this morning. These are the threads, mes amis, and they weave a story of betrayal and deceit. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. The rose. It was not from the vase in Mademoiselle Celia's room, but from the garden, freshly cut. This suggests someone placed it there, perhaps as a message. The note, unfinished, spoke of a truth too heavy to bear. The fragment, betrayed, and another, cannot forgive, point to a personal wound. The glove with its oil stain, and the footprint, smaller than Mademoiselle Celia's, suggest a meeting in the garden. And the letter to Madame Langley, delivered after the disappearance, implies someone wishes to direct our attention. Lawrence's voice broke the silence, sharp with desperation. Monsieur Poirot, enough of this. If you know something, say it. Where is Celia? Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. Patience, Monsieur Cavendish. Let us consider the timeline. Mademoiselle Celia was last seen by Madame Langley at 11, hurrying to her room. Madame Langley heard a door close at midnight. Dr. Fowler claims he was asleep, yet his nerves betray him. Mademoiselle Trent saw a letter signed C.W. that upset Mademoiselle Celia. And you, Monsieur Cavendish, you were reading, yet you falter when questioned. These contradictions, they are the cracks through which the truth escapes. Poirot turned to Mrs. Langley, his voice softening. Madame, your letter, it was a revelation, but also a distraction. You spoke of a meeting with Dr. Fowler in the garden 2 nights ago. Yet the glove, found yesterday, was stained with oil from the gardening shed, and the footprint was fresh. This suggests a meeting on the night of the disappearance, not
The glass, they tell a different story. Let us consider another possibility. Mademoiselle Celia. She discovered a secret, a betrayal that shattered her trust. She wrote a note, but was interrupted. She went to the rose garden, carrying a lantern to confront someone. There, a struggle occurred. The lantern broke, the glove was dropped, and Mademoiselle Celia, she was taken. A collective gasp filled the room. Sir Reginald's voice was hoarse. Taken? You mean kidnapped? Poirot raised a hand. Or worse, Sir Reginald. But let us not assume too quickly. The letter accusing Madame Langley, it was placed under her door this morning. Who had access to Mademoiselle Celia's writing? Who knew of her distress,
and who wished to cast suspicion on Madame Langley. Dr. Fowler's voice trembled. Monsieur Poirot, I swear I had nothing to do with this. I was helping Beatrice with her finances, that's all. Poirot's gaze shifted to him, piercing. And yet, Doctor, you are nervous. Too nervous for a man with nothing to hide. You prescribed a sedative for Mademoiselle Celia, which she refused, saying she needed to stay alert. Why? Because she knew something was coming. A confrontation, perhaps. Poirot turned to Miss Trent, his tone measured. Mademoiselle, you saw a letter signed C.W. It was not from Monsieur Cavendish, I think, but from another, Clara Wentworth, the woman to whom Monsieur Cavendish owes money. Mademoiselle Celia saw this letter, and it confirmed her fears of betrayal. Lawrence's face flushed. That's nonsense. Clara's an old friend, nothing more. Celia knew that. Poirot's voice was calm but relentless. Did she, monsieur? Or did she see a man in debt, marrying her for her fortune? But let us not be too quick. The true betrayal, it was not financial, but personal. Mademoiselle Celia's diary, it holds the key. And I believe, mes amis, that someone in this room knows where it is. He paused, letting the silence stretch, then turned to Lady Margaret, whose composure faltered for the first time. Madame, you spoke with Mademoiselle Celia at 11. You said she was distressed about her engagement. But I think you knew more. You knew of her fears, her suspicions. And you, Madame, have access to the gardening shed, where the oil was found. Lady Margaret's eyes widened, her voice sharp. This is outrageous. I loved Celia like a daughter. I would never harm her. Poirot's smile was cold. Harm, Madame? Perhaps not. But conceal. That is another matter. The diary. It was in Mademoiselle Celia's room, but it is gone. And you, with your private talks, your knowledge of the house, you took it to protect a secret. Lady Margaret's hands, her fears about Monsieur Cavendish. But the true betrayal came from another, someone close, who used her trust to manipulate her. That person met her in the garden, and when she confronted them, she was silenced. He turned to Dr. Fowler, his voice like steel. Doctor, it was you. You met Mademoiselle Celia in the garden, carrying a lantern from the shed. You dropped the glove, Madame Langley's, taken to cast suspicion. You took her diary to hide the truth of your affair with Madame Langley, which Mademoiselle Celia witnessed and could not forgive. Dr. Fowler's face crumpled, his voice a whisper. No, it wasn't like that. I didn't mean to hurt her. She was so angry. She wouldn't listen. I pushed her, and she fell. I panicked. Hid her in the shed. She's alive, I swear. The room erupted in chaos, but Poirot's voice cut through. Inspector Reed, you will find Mademoiselle Celia in the gardening shed, unconscious but alive. And the diary. It is in Dr. Fowler's room, hidden among his medical books. As Reed rushed out, the guests sat in stunned silence. The truth laid bare. Poirot's trap had sprung, and the shadows of Ashwood Manor had yielded to his relentless logic. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The tumult of the previous evening had left Ashwood Manor in a state of fragile calm as the morning of September 13th, 1925, dawned over the Devon hills. The revelation of Dr. Ernest Fowler's actions had shaken the household to its core. Yet the discovery of Celia Ashwood, alive but unconscious in the gardening shed, brought a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. She had been rushed to the local hospital, where Dr. Fowler's sedatives, administered in a moment of panic, were being carefully counteracted. The diary, found exactly where Hercule Poirot had predicted, among Fowler's medical books, lay open in the library, its pages a silent testament to Celia's anguish and betrayal. Captain Hastings, standing by the library window, felt a mix of relief and disquiet, the weight of the mystery's resolution tempered
by the lingering shadows it had cast. Hercule Poirot, seated at the library table, his notebook closed and his hands folded, exuded an air of quiet satisfaction. His suit was impeccable as ever, his moustache a perfect curve, but his eyes held a depth of contemplation that Hastings recognized as the detective's moment of reflection. "Mon ami?" Poirot said, his voice soft but resonant. "The case, it is solved. Yet the heart, it lingers on the why. The little grey cells, they have done their work, but the human soul, it demands understanding." Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. "Poirot, you were brilliant last night. The way you pieced it all together." Steepled. "The why, Hastings, it is always the heart of the matter. Let us reflect. Mademoiselle Celia, she was a young woman of sensitivity, caught in a web of deceit. Her diary, it revealed her discovery of an affair between Madame Langley and Dr. Fowler, a betrayal not of love, but of trust, for Madame Langley was her cousin, almost a sister. This affair, it threatened the honor of the Ashwood family, and Mademoiselle Celia, she could not forgive it." He paused, his eyes distant. "Dr. Fowler, he is a man of weak character, driven by fear. When Mademoiselle Celia confronted him in the rose garden, carrying a lantern to light her way, she demanded he end the affair, or she would expose it. In his panic, he pushed her, and she fell, striking her head. Believing he had caused grave harm, he hid her in the shed, administering a sedative to keep her unconscious. The glove, it was Madame Langley's, taken to cast suspicion on her. The letter, it was written by Mademoiselle Celia before her confrontation, but Fowler placed it under Madame Langley's door to divert attention." Hastings shook his head, his voice tinged with disbelief. "But why go to such lengths? Why not confess or at least call for help?" Poirot's smile was wistful. "The human heart, mon ami, it is a fragile thing. Dr. Fowler, he feared ruin, not just for himself, but for Madame Langley, whose financial troubles he was entangled in. He believed that by hiding Mademoiselle Celia, he could buy time to concoct a story. But the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot, they do not permit such deception to endure." The library door opened, and Inspector Reed entered, his face weary but respectful. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "Miss Ashwood's awake. She's weak, but the doctors say she'll recover. She's confirmed your account. She went to the garden to confront Fowler about his affair with Mrs. Langley. She's devastated, but grateful to be alive." Poirot nodded, his expression serene. "Merci, Inspector. And Dr. Fowler?" "In custody," Reed replied. "He's confessed to everything, though he swears he meant no lasting harm. Mrs. Langley's being questioned too. She admits to the affair but denies knowing about Celia's confrontation." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Madame Langley, she is not without guilt, but her crime is one of indiscretion, not violence. The diary, it tells the truth, and Mademoiselle Celia's courage, it brought the truth to light." As Reed departed, Hastings sat across from Poirot, his mind still grappling with the case's intricacies. "And Lawrence? Those letters from Clara Wentworth." "Villain, but neither is he without fault." The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over them. Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. "Poirot, how do you do it? How do you see through the lies, the half-truths, and find the heart of it all?" Poirot's eyes softened, a rare glimpse of vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. "Mon ami, it is not merely the logic, though logic is the foundation.
It is the understanding of the human heart, the passions, the fears, the desires that drive us to act against our better selves. Hercule Poirot, he listens, he observes, and he remembers that even the guilty, they are human. To solve a crime, one must see not only the act, but the soul behind it. Hastings nodded, struck by the simplicity and profundity of Poirot's philosophy. And now, what happens to Ashwood Manor? To the family? Poirot rose, his movements deliberate. The manor, it will heal, as will Mademoiselle Celia. Though the scars, they remain. Sir Reginald, he must face the truth of his family's secrets. Madame Langley, she must confront her choices. And Monsieur Cavendish, he must decide if love can survive suspicion. As for Hercule Poirot, his work here is done. They stepped into the hall, where the household was beginning to stir, the news of Celia's recovery spreading like a tentative ray of sunlight. Sir Reginald, his face lighter than it had been in days, approached Poirot, his hand extended. "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot thank you enough. You've saved my daughter, and you've brought the truth to light." Poirot bowed slightly, his demeanour humble yet proud. "It is my duty, Sir Reginald. The little grey cells, they serve the truth. Always." As the guests prepared to depart, their faces a mix of relief and lingering unease, Poirot and Hastings made their way to the waiting car. The manor's ivy-clad walls loomed behind them, a testament to secrets kept and revealed. Hastings glanced at his friend, a question in his eyes. "Poirot, do you ever tire of it? The lies, the betrayals, the darkness?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Tire, mon ami? No. For every darkness there is a light, the light of truth, and that, it is what Hercule Poirot lives for." As the car pulled away, Ashwood Manor faded into the distance, its grandeur restored but its innocence forever altered. Hastings leaned back, his mind at ease, knowing that Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth had once again prevailed, leaving behind a world a little clearer, if not entirely healed. Word count, 1400. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The afternoon of September 13th of 1925 draped Ashwood Manor in a tentative peace, the storm of Celia Ashwood's disappearance and recovery having left the household in a state of fragile recovery. The Devon hills, bathed in soft sunlight, seemed to whisper of renewal, yet Hastings, standing on the terrace overlooking the manicured lawns, felt a mix of relief and disquiet. The resolution of the mystery, orchestrated by Hercule Poirot's relentless logic, had restored Celia to her family, but the revelations of deceit and hidden motives had altered the fabric of Ashwood Manor irrevocably. Hercule Poirot, his small figure immaculate in a perfectly tailored suit, joined Hastings on the terrace, his cane tapping lightly against the stone. His moustache gleamed in the sunlight, and his green eyes held a quiet intensity, as though the little grey cells were still sifting through the nuances of the case. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "You are pensive, yes? The truth has been found. Mademoiselle Celia is safe, and yet the heart, it lingers on the echoes of what has passed." Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. "Poirot, it's just so much has come to light. Dr. Fowler's affair with Mrs. Langley, Celia's discovery, the confrontation in the garden, it's all so sordid. And Lawrence with his debts and that Clara Wentworth business. Do you think Celia will ever forgive him?" Poirot's gaze drifted to the rose garden, where the events of that fateful night had unfolded. "Forgiveness, Hastings, it is a matter of the heart, not of logic. Mademoiselle Celia, she has been wounded, but she is strong. The diary, it revealed her pain, but also her courage. As for Monsieur Cavendish, his motives were mixed, but love, I believe, was among them. Whether it is enough, only time will tell." The morning had been spent tying up loose ends. Inspector Reed, efficient as ever, had overseen Dr. Fowler's formal arrest, the physician's confession corroborated by Celia's halting account from her hospital bed.
She had spoken of her shock at discovering Mrs. Langley's affair with Dr. Fowler, a betrayal that cut deeply given her closeness to her cousin. The confrontation in the rose garden, fueled by her anger and Fowler's desperation, had ended in a moment of violence, a push that sent her tumbling unconscious to the ground. Fowler, in his panic, had hidden her in the shed, hoping to buy time to craft an alibi. The glove, the lantern shard, the planted letter, all were his attempts to shift blame. But Poirot's keen eye had unraveled the deception. The diary, now safely in Sir Reginald's possession, had been a painful read for the family. Its pages detailed Celia's growing suspicions about Lawrence's finances, her discovery of the affair, and her resolve to confront the truth, no matter the cost. The word betrayed, scrawled in her hand, was not just about Fowler and Mrs. Langley, but about the shattering of her trust in those closest to her. As Poirot and Hastings walked back into the manor, they found Sir Reginald in the library, his face a mask of weary gratitude. "Monsieur Poirot," "Express. Celia's awake, and though she's frail, the doctors say she'll make a full recovery. Your clarity, your persistence, it saved my family." Poirot bowed slightly, his demeanor humble, yet proud. "It is my duty, Sir Reginald. The truth, it is a light that must be shown, even when it reveals shadows. But tell me, how fares Mademoiselle Celia's spirit?" Sir Reginald's eyes clouded. "She's heartbroken, of course. Beatrice's betrayal, Lawrence's debts. It's a lot for her to bear. But she's strong, my girl. She wants to see you, to thank you herself." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I shall visit her, but not today. She must rest, and the heart. It needs time to heal." The other guests, their roles in the drama exposed, were preparing to depart. Mrs. Langley, her face drawn with shame, had announced her intention to return to London, her affair with Dr. Fowler a secret she could no longer hide. Lawrence, though cleared of direct involvement in Celia's disappearance, faced an uncertain future, his engagement hanging by a thread. Miss Evelyn Trent, ever the observer, had filled pages of her notebook, her sharp eyes already envisioning a novel inspired by the manor's secrets. Mr. Hargreaves, his joviality restored, offered Poirot a hearty handshake, muttering something about a damned fine show. Lady Margaret, however, lingered in the drawing room, her regal poise intact but her eyes betraying a flicker of vulnerability. Poirot approached her, his voice gentle. "Madame, you knew more than you admitted, I think. The diary, you suspected its contents, yes?" Lady Margaret's lips tightened, but she nodded. "I saw Celia writing in it, looking so distressed. I feared she was uncovering things best left buried. Family matters, old wounds. I urged her to let them go, but she was stubborn, like her mother." Poirot's eyes softened. "And yet, madame, it was her stubbornness that brought the truth to light. The family it will heal, but only through honesty." As the day drew to a close, Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave Ashwood Manor, their bags packed and the car waiting. The manor, with its ivy-clad walls and rose gardens, stood as a silent witness to the drama that had unfolded within its walls. Hastings, glancing back, felt a pang of melancholy. "Poirot, do you think they'll ever be the same? The Ashwoods, I mean, after all this?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The same, mon ami. None but better, perhaps. For the truth, it cleanses as well as wounds. Mademoiselle Celia, she will find her strength. Sir Reginald, he will protect his family. And the others, they will learn from their mistakes, or they will not. That is the way of life." As they settled into the car, the engine humming softly, Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed. "The case of Ashwood Manor. It reminds us, Hastings, that the heart, it is both fragile and resilient. The little grey cells, they
solve the mystery, but the soul, it seeks understanding. And Hercule Poirot, he serves both." The car pulled away, the manor fading into the distance, its secrets laid bare, but its future uncertain. Hastings, watching the rolling hills pass by, felt a quiet admiration for his friend's ability to navigate the labyrinth of human nature, bringing light to the darkest corners. The echoes of truth, as Poirot had said, would linger, but for now, the mystery was solved and the world moved on.
Word count 1,400. Chapter 13. The Unseen Threads. The late afternoon of September 13th, 1925, cast a gentle golden light over Ashwood Manor, softening the edges of its ancient stones and lending an air of quiet restoration to the estate. The resolution of Celia Ashwood's disappearance had brought relief, yet the revelations of betrayal and deceit lingered like a faint mist, clinging to the household's fragile peace. Captain Hastings, standing in the rose garden where the drama had reached its climax, inhaled the sweet fragrance of the blooms, his thoughts tangled with the complexities of the case. Hercule Poirot, ever meticulous, joined him, his small figure a study in precision, his cane tapping lightly against the gravel path. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice carrying the calm authority that had guided them through the storm. "You are reflective, yes? The mystery is solved. Mademoiselle Celia is safe, yet you sense there are threads still unseen. N'est-ce pas?" Hastings turned, his expression troubled. "Poirot, you've done it again, unraveled the knot with your little grey cells, but I can't help feeling we've missed something. The affair between Mrs. Langley and Dr. Fowler, Lawrence's debts, Celia's diary, it all fits, but there's a nagging doubt. Was there more to Celia's fear, something we haven't uncovered?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching with a faint smile. "You are perceptive, Hastings, in your own way. The case, it is solved, but the human heart, it is a tapestry of many threads, some too fine to see at first glance. Let us walk, and I shall share what the little grey cells have pondered." They strolled through the garden, the roses nodding in the breeze, their petals a vivid reminder of the clue that had first hinted at the truth. Poirot paused by the spot where the oil-stained glove and footprint had been found, his gaze distant. The solution, it was clear: Dr. Fowler's panic, his attempt to conceal his affair with Madame Langley, the confrontation that led to Mademoiselle Celia's injury. But you are right to sense more. The diary, it revealed her pain, but it also hinted at a deeper fear, one not fully explained by the affair. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. "You mean there's another secret?"
Mademoiselle Trent mentioned this, yes? A sense of being observed, of unease. This shadow, I believe, was not Dr. Fowler alone, but another influence, one that drove her to confront him in the garden. They returned to the library, where the diary remained under Sir Reginald's care. Poirot requested to see it once more, and Sir Reginald, though weary, obliged, his hands trembling as he handed over the leather-bound volume. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice heavy, "you've saved my daughter, but I fear what more this book might reveal. Celia's been through enough." Poirot's expression was gentle but firm. "Sir Reginald, the truth. It is a balm as well as a wound. Permit me to examine it once more, to ensure no stone is unturned." The diary's pages, filled with Celia's elegant script, were a map of her inner turmoil. Poirot turned to a passage near the end, his finger tracing the words. "I feel it again, the shadow behind me, watching. It is not just Beatrice's betrayal, nor Lawrence's secrets. There is something else, something older, tied to the family. I must know, even if it breaks me." Hastings leaned over, his breath catching. "Something older? Poirot, what does she mean? Something about the Ashwood family?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Précisément, mon ami. The affair, the debts, they were the sparks, but the fire, it burns deeper. Let us consider Lady Margaret. She knew of Mademoiselle Celia's distress, yet she urged silence. Why? To protect the family honor, or to conceal a secret of her own?" They sought out Lady Margaret, who was in the drawing-room, her regal poise restored, but her eyes wary. Poirot approached with his usual courtesy, his voice soft but probing. "Madame, the diary of Mademoiselle Celia, it speaks of a shadow, something tied to the family. You were close to her mother, were you not? Tell me, what secret did Mademoiselle Celia fear?" Lady Margaret's lips tightened, her hands folding tightly in her lap. "Monsieur Poirot, you've done your work. Celia is safe. Why dredge up old ghosts?" Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Because, madame, the ghosts, they do not rest. Mademoiselle Celia felt a shadow, a truth she could not name. I believe you know it. It's time to speak." After a long pause, Lady Margaret sighed, her shoulders sagging. "Very well. Celia's mother, my sister-in-law, had a liaison years ago, before Celia was born. It was hushed up, but there were rumors of a child given away to protect the family name. Celia must have overheard something, perhaps in the library, where old letters are kept."
She suspected Dr. Fowler knew something, as he was her mother's physician. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And so, Mademoiselle Celia confronted him, not only about his affair, but about this secret. It explains her urgency, her fear. Dr. Fowler, he panicked, not just to protect his liaison with Madame Langley, but to keep this older secret buried. They returned to the library, where Poirot made a final note in his book. "The shadow, Hastings. It was the weight of the past. Mademoiselle Celia sought the truth, and it nearly cost her life. But now the truth is known, and the family, they must face it." As evening approached, Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart Ashwood Manor for good. The household was quieter now, the guests dispersing, each carrying their own burdens. Celia, still in the hospital, had sent a message through her father, thanking Poirot for his insight and promising to heal, both in body and spirit. Lawrence, his future uncertain, had vowed to prove his love, though whether Celia would accept him remained unclear. As they stepped into the waiting car, Hastings glanced at Poirot, a question in his eyes. "Poirot, do you think the Ashwoods will ever recover from this? The affair, the debts, and now this secret about Celia's mother? It's a lot to bear." Poirot's smile was wistful. "The human heart, mon ami, it is resilient. The Ashwoods, they will mend, though the scars, they remain. The truth, it is a heavy burden, but also a liberation. And Hercule Poirot, he has done his part to lift it." The car pulled away, the manor's ivy-clad walls fading into the twilight. Hastings leaned back, his mind at ease, knowing that Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth had unraveled not just a crime, but the unseen threads that bound a family's past to its present. Chapter 14. The Final Pieces. The evening of September 13th, 1925, settled over Ashwood Manor with a quiet that felt both restorative and fragile, as though the estate itself were exhaling after the storm of revelations. The Devon hills, cloaked in twilight, stood sentinel over the manor, their gentle slopes a stark contrast to the turmoil that had unfolded within its walls. Captain Hastings, standing in the grand hall as he prepared to depart, felt a mix of satisfaction and lingering unease. The mystery of Celia Ashwood's disappearance had been solved, her safety restored, and the truth of Dr. Fowler's actions laid bare. Yet, the deeper secret of a possible sibling, hinted at in Celia's diary and confirmed by Lady Margaret, cast a long shadow over the resolution. Hercule Poirot, his small figure immaculate as ever, stood beside Hastings, his green eyes reflecting the soft glow of the hall's chandelier.
"Until all is clear." Hastings nodded, adjusting his hat.
"Poirot, you've unraveled so much. Dr. Fowler's affair, the confrontation, the hidden sibling. But I can't help wondering if there's more. That shadow Celia wrote about in her diary, It feels like there's still something we haven't fully grasped. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. You are learning, Hastings, to see beyond the surface. The shadow. It was not just the affair or the family's secret, but a fear born of intuition. Mademoiselle Celia sensed a danger, a manipulation that went beyond what she could name. Let us revisit the library one last time, for there is a detail I wish to confirm. They returned to the library, where the air was heavy with the scent of old books and wax. The diary, now returned to Sir Reginald, lay on the table, its pages a silent record of Celia's turmoil. Poirot opened it to a passage he had marked earlier, his finger tracing the words. The shadow watches, not just in the garden, but in the house. I see it in the eyes, in the silences. I must know, even if it destroys me. Hastings frowned, his mind racing. In the house, Poirot. She felt watched here too, but by whom? We've accounted for everyone. Fowler, Mrs. Langley, even Lady Margaret. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Not everyone, mon ami. That is one whose silence has been too perfect, whose presence has been too unobtrusive. Monsieur Victor Hargreaves, the solicitor. He has been hearty, yes, but always on the edges, observing, asking questions about the estate. I wonder, what is his true role in this drama? They sought out Sir Reginald, who was in his study, poring over estate papers with a weary expression. Monsieur Poirot, he said, looking up. You're leaving soon, I understand. But is there more? Celia's recovering, but I fear what else she might uncover. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. Sir Reginald, a final question. Monsieur Hargreaves, he is your solicitor, yes? How long has he served the family? And what is his interest in Mademoiselle Celia's inheritance? Sir Reginald's brow furrowed. Hargreaves? He's been with us for years, since my wife's time. He manages the estate's legal affairs, including Celia's trust. He's been curious about her engagement, asking about Lawrence's finances, but I thought it was just professional diligence. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Diligence, perhaps, or something more. May I see the documents he has reviewed recently? Sir Reginald hesitated, then opened a drawer, producing a folder of legal papers. Poirot examined them with meticulous care, his fingers pausing on a document detailing Celia's inheritance, a substantial sum tied to her mother's estate, including the sapphire brooch. A small note in Hargreaves' hand was clipped to the page. Verify legitimacy of claim. Potential issue with prior beneficiary. Poirot's mustache
Twitched. Most interesting. A prior beneficiary, perhaps the child Madame Margaret spoke of? What's interesting? Poirot approached, his voice polite but steely. Monsieur Hargreaves, you have been most helpful, staying out of the fray. But tell me, what is your interest in Mademoiselle Celia's inheritance? And why did you note a prior beneficiary in the estate papers? Hargreaves' smile faltered, his hand tightening on the glass. Monsieur Poirot, I'm merely the family solicitor. My job is to protect the estate. That note, it's routine, checking for any legal complications. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. Routine, monsieur, or a cover for your own concerns? Mademoiselle Celia's diary spoke of a shadow, someone watching. I believe you were that shadow, probing her intentions, fearing she had uncovered the truth about her mother's child, a child who might claim part of the estate you manage. Hargreaves' face reddened, but he maintained his composure. That's absurd. I've served this family loyally for years. Celia's fancies don't make me a villain. Poirot's smile was cold. No, monsieur, not a villain, but a man with secrets. You knew of the child, and you feared Mademoiselle Celia's questions would disrupt the estate's finances. Finances you control, perhaps to your benefit. You did not harm her, but you watched. You waited. And your silence, it allowed Dr. Fowler's actions to go unchecked. Hargreaves set down his glass, his voice low. I admit I knew about the rumors of a child. I was protecting the family's interests, nothing more. If Celia was asking questions, I needed to know why. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. And in doing so, You became part of the shadow she feared. The truth, monsieur, it is now complete. As they prepared to leave, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice hushed. So Hargreaves was involved, in a way, not in the crime but in the secrecy. Oui, mon ami, Poirot replied. He was the unseen thread weaving through the tapestry of this mystery. His silence, his watchfulness, they fed Mademoiselle Celia's fear, pushing her toward the confrontation that nearly cost her life. The little grey cells, they see all, even the threads that hide in plain sight. The car awaited them, and as they stepped into the cool evening air, Ashwood Manor loomed behind, its grandeur a facade for the secrets it had held. Hastings glanced at Poirot, a question in his eyes. Will Celia ever know the full truth, Poirot, about the child, about Hargreaves? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. She will know what she needs to heal, Hastings. The truth, it is a gift, but it must be given with
care. For now, Hercule Poirot has done his part, and the manor, it will find its way. As the car pulled away, the manor faded into the twilight, its roses glowing faintly in the dusk. The final pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place, and Hastings felt a quiet awe at Poirot's ability to illuminate the unseen, leaving Ashwood Manor to face its future with the truth laid bare. Chapter 15. The Departure. The morning of September 14, 1925, broke over Ashwood Manor with a clarity that seemed to cleanse the estate of its recent shadows. The Devon hills, bathed in soft sunlight, stretched endlessly before the manor, their gentle slopes a silent promise of renewal. The resolution of Celia Ashwood's disappearance, coupled with the unmasking of Dr. Fowler's actions and the revelation of deeper family secrets, had left the household in a state of quiet reckoning. Captain Hastings, standing by the grand oak door with his suitcase in hand, felt a complex mix of relief, melancholy, and admiration for the little Belgian detective who had unraveled the mystery. Hercule Poirot, his suit as impeccable as ever, his mustache a perfect curve, stood beside him, his green eyes reflecting a serene satisfaction. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft but resonant. "The case of Ashwood Manor, it is complete. The truth, it has been revealed. And Mademoiselle Celia, she will heal. Yet, you are thoughtful, yes? The heart, it lingers on the echoes of what we have learned." Hastings nodded, adjusting his hat as he glanced back at the manor's ivy-clad walls. "Poirot, you've done it again. Cut through the lies and secrets with those little grey cells of yours. But I can't help wondering about Celia, about the family. That secret about her mother's child, Hargreaves' watchfulness, it's so much for them to bear. Will they ever find peace?" Poirot's smile was wistful, his cane tapping lightly against the gravel drive. "Peace, Hastings, it is not the absence of pain, but the courage to face it. The Ashwoods, they have the truth now, and the truth, it is both a burden and a liberation. Mademoiselle Celia, she is strong, and with time, she will find her way." The morning had been spent in farewells. Sir Reginald, his face softened by gratitude, had clasped Poirot's hand with fervour, his voice thick with emotion. "Monsieur Poirot, you've given me back my daughter, and more, you've shown us the truth, however painful. I don't know how to repay you." Poirot had bowed, his demeanour humble, yet
had read it in silence, his eyes softening, before tucking it into his pocket with care. The other guests had dispersed, each carrying the weight of their own truths. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her affair with Dr. Fowler exposed, had left for London, her face drawn with shame but her resolve firm to rebuild her life. Lawrence Cavendish, his engagement to Celia uncertain, had vowed to prove his sincerity, though Hastings suspected the shadow of his debts would linger. Miss Evelyn Trent, her notebook brimming with the drama of Ashwood Manor, had departed with a gleam in her eye, already plotting her next novel. Mr. Victor Hargreaves, his role as the silent observer revealed, had offered a gruff apology for his secrecy, insisting his only motive was to protect the estate's finances. Lady Margaret, however, remained a figure of quiet enigma. As Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave, she approached them in the hall, her regal poise tempered by a rare vulnerability. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "you've uncovered secrets I thought buried forever. The child, my sister-in-law's mistake, it was a wound I hoped Celia would never know. I was wrong to hide it, but I wanted to protect her." Poirot's gaze was gentle but unwavering. "Madame, the heart seeks to shield, but the truth, it demands to be known. Mademoiselle Celia, she has the strength to face this past, and you must trust her to do so." Lady Margaret nodded, her eyes glistening. "You're right, Monsieur Poirot. I'll speak to her, tell her everything. Thank you for seeing what I could not." As they stepped into the waiting car, the manor's grandeur loomed behind them, its roses glowing in the morning light. Hastings settled into his seat, his mind replaying the case, the rose on the pillow, the oil-stained glove, the diary's anguished words, the shadow of a hidden sibling. "Poirot," he said, turning to his friend, "you always say the little grey cells never fail, but it's more than that, isn't it? It's your understanding of people, their motives, their fears." Poirot's eyes twinkled, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "Oui, mon ami. The logic, it is the foundation, but the heart, it is the key. To solve a mystery, one must see not only the clues, but the souls behind them. The affair, the debts, the family secret, they were all threads in a tapestry of human frailty. And Hercule Poirot, he weaves them together to reveal the truth." The car wound through the Devon countryside, the manor fading into the distance like a memory. Hastings leaned back, a quiet awe settling over him. "Do you think Celia will marry Lawrence after all this, or will the secrets drive them apart?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The heart, it is unpredictable, Hastings. Mademoiselle Celia, she has seen betrayal, but also love. If Monsieur Cavendish is sincere, Poirot to decide." As the car reached the station, Poirot glanced back one last time, his expression serene. "The case of Ashwood Manor, it reminds us, mon ami, that the truth, it is a mirror. It shows us who we are and who we might become. For the Ashwoods, that mirror is clear now, and they must choose what to see." The train whistle sounded, and Hastings followed Poirot aboard, the weight of the mystery lifting with each step. Ashwood Manor, with its secrets and surprises, was behind them, but the echoes of Poirot's brilliance would linger, a testament to the power of logic, observation, and the unyielding pursuit of truth.